Greetings to all of you. I'm Pastor Timothy Muse, lead pastor here at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Alliance, Ohio. It's a joy to be with you today on the 27th session in the book of Revelation. It has been a pleasure to walk with you through this book so far, and I pray that it has been informative and uplifting for you as we've continued to journey through this fascinating and rather odd book in the Bible. So we're going to continue on today. Revelation is the last book in the Bible. It is the last book in the New Testament. So I would encourage you to have a Bible in front of you. As we travel through this book, you can use whatever translation or paraphrase that works for you, whatever you have available. You can either have a book in front of you, or if you're listening and can have a piece open online, a digital book, you're welcome to do that as well. I find it's very important and informative to actually have the words in front of you as we go through it, because there's much in the Bible that is left to speculation and paraphrase, that it's really important to know exactly what the Bible is saying, even the difficult parts. And we're going to come across some difficult parts today that we're going to unpack. So it's important for us to have the book in front of us. If this is your first time with us, welcome. If you have been traveling through this, welcome back. I certainly would encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to check out any previous sessions, to go back. We have been walking through the book from the beginning, and all of this kind of does lead forward. So even though apocalyptic literature is not narrative based, it's not chronological from point A to point B to point C to point D, it does build on itself as we move forward. So it would certainly be helpful for you to understand the totality of the book, to look at things going on in the past, in the previous sessions. They're all posted up on my YouTube page, so you can access them accordingly. So right now we're at the beginning of chapter 14 of the book of Revelation, and we're going to enter again into a 7 pronouncement cycle. Revelation has had a number of 7 cycles. We had the 7 seals on the scroll, we had the 7 trumpets, we had the 7 angels, now we're going to have 7 more angels, and we're going to see another series of 7 coming up in chapter 15 as well. This is not uncommon for apocalyptic literature. It's repetition with variation. That's apocalyptic literature. It's telling kind of the same thing over and over again with variation. And the point of that, because we're not talking about something that has happened, we're talking about something that's going to happen. Looking into the future is very difficult to do, because the future can have a myriad of different paths, depend on decision making and situation and circumstance. I mean, let's be honest. If we could go back to this time last year, Advent season last year, looking out into the future, what one of us would have imagined that the path we would be choosing would be under the midst of a pandemic, where the church has been doing remote worship? What one of us would have imagined that we've been doing Bible study here at St. Paul's for over 10 years, that this would be the strata that would be doing it, that we would be gathering virtually to do Bible study rather than together. What one of us would have imagined a year ago that the path forward would have included masks and social distancing and a bunch of hand sanitizer. So when we look into the future, when we pattern things into the future, part of what we have to do is understand that the future does change based on decision-making, circumstances, and what have you. The ultimate end goal of where God is going, we'll get there. But we do have a play in it. We do have a role in it. If we didn't, then everything was just written for us from the beginning of time down to the last letter, and we don't have any place in it. Well, I have a hard time accepting that. I have a hard time accepting that we don't have some level of free will and decision making, because I know even in my own life that I'm sinful. I make decisions that aren't always the best ones, and if all of these decisions are patterned out for me from the beginning of time, well, then I would have hoped that maybe God would have patterned out a few better decisions. So I do believe that we have free will, and that we make decisions that impact the future, our future. So with that being said, with that being the case, we have this we have apocalyptic literature that lays out a future that ultimately will come to the end goal. And the end goal of redemption. And we'll get to that at the end. But there are multiple possible paths. And so this apocalyptic literature lays out these repetitions. They look very similar, but there are differences. And those differences are important to not only acknowledge, but experience and embrace. So that's what we're going to see here when we get into chapter 14. Now, chapter 14 is divided up into two sections. It's divided up into the introduction, and then it's divided up into the seven angels. We're going to focus on the introduction today because there's a lot in the introduction that needs to be addressed. And then next session, we're going to focus on the seven angels. So that's our vision for today. That's our vision for today. Again, and I would encourage you to have a Bible in front of you, either digital or printed page, printed text, so that you can follow along and see where we're going. All right. So this is chapter 14, verse 1 is where we begin. All right, so here we go. Then I looked, and there was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their forehead. Okay, so we're going to stop here for a minute. So the vision that we get. Now, if we go back to chapter 13, and previous chapters, John looked and saw the dragon who chased after the people of Israel. And then that dragon stood behind the beast, who was the Roman emperor and the empire of Rome, and the second beast, who were the priests of Rome. Okay, so we have this antithesis, this ultimate in evil rising up out of the sea, rising up, standing on the dry land, this monolith of evil, ready to swipe at the earth. So then John looks to Mount Zion. Now this is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a city built on the mountain, on the hill. It's called Mount Zion. That's something that is said multiple times throughout the Old Testament. So he says, then I looked, and there was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion. The Lamb being Jesus. Okay? So what we have here, we have these two great figures. The dragon, the devil, the ultimate in evil, the Lamb, the crucified one, the Messiah, the ultimate in good. So we have, and remember what I said before about the three-tiered reality of the New Testament. Heaven above, hell below, us in the middle. Good above, evil below, not really quite sure what's going on in the middle. Which is where we are, humans, saints, and sinners, both divine and evil. So we have the two basically standing ready to square off. Okay, we have the two basically ready standing to square off. The ultimate in good, which is the Lamb, and the ultimate in evil, which is the dragon. So the dragon and the Lamb. And really when you look at these images, when you think about these images, when we think about a dragon, we think about, mean and big and nasty and scary and fire-breathing and scales and tails and ears. And a dragon is not meant to be pretty. A dragon in the Old Testament and a dragon in ancient mythology, such as the Enuma Elish and Tiamat, these are monsters. Now, sorry to offend any dragons out there. Not my intention to, but dragons are pitted as monsters. Okay? So here is the dragon, this big, scary monster being representing evil. And then here is God, represented as a lamb. Not a sheep, not a goat, but a lamb. A spotless lamb. So there's really nothing more innocent, more pure than a lamb. And so really, when we think about God in conquering evil, we would think God would rise up as some messianic warrior, some big, burly, mighty fighter. But God is represented as the Lamb. Again, and this representation, we know this to be Christ. Because Christ is alluded to, spoken to all throughout the book of Revelation and throughout the New Testament, and even in the church today, as the Lamb, the Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God. We use that statement often in worship. We call Christ the Lamb who was slain. So we know this image. So Jesus the Son of God, Messiah, Word made flesh, crucified outside of Jerusalem, rose from the dead, went to Galilee, spoke to his disciples, rose up into heaven, ascended into heaven. Now the vision is the Lamb standing on Mount Zion. So if Jerusalem is the city of God, then the Lamb would come into the city of God. So this would be the ultimate in power. This would be the ultimate in authority. This would be the last stand, if you will. And the Lamb is not alone. There were 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. Now let's go back just a little bit. Remember that there was the mark of the beast. We saw that just at the end of the last chapter, where those who followed the beast, those who followed Rome, those who were part of the Roman Empire, part of Roman citizenry, had that mark either on their wrist or on their forehead, indicating that they were Roman citizens, that they were part of the country. Well, now we have this purity factor, in that we have not only the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, but we've got 144,000. Now, for us in a world of 8 billion, functioning in a world where we understand billions and billions, and we understand terabytes and multiple terabytes, and these numbers aren't real big. 144,000. I mean, that's a pretty decent salary. But in the ancient world, 144,000 would have been an unimaginable number. It would have been huge. It wouldn't have been all inclusive, okay? 144,000 wouldn't have represented the total population of the earth. However, it would have been a massive number. And the number is 12,000 times 12,000. 12 tribes of Israel. So 12 tribes of Israel carried out. So this does carry some indication of fulfillment, of a massiveness of the nation, of the people. And they are with the Lamb. So these are the warriors of the Lamb. So we have the dragon. Remember I said last time, the dragon, used the beast, which is the Roman emperor, and the littler beast, the priests and the scribes and the counselors and the rulers of Rome. They were the ones who were executing, who were extending out the power of evil in the world. Well, now we have the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, awesome, with 144,000. So these are the warriors of the Lamb. So what's being laid out here is this idea of a great battle. You've got Rome backed by the devil, and you've got the Lamb backed by 144,000 armies ready to go to war. And war is necessary. The ultimate consummation of the destruction of evil comes through a battle between the forces of God and the forces of the devil. The devil's not going to give up. The devil's not going to stop. So that's what we get here. That's the picture that's being painted. What John is seeing, John saw the devil in the beast, or in the dragon, rise up with the beast and employ the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire was persecuting, oppressing, taking away everything from the Christians, which one could imagine, just from a realistic standpoint. If you were a Christian living in Rome, and you were promised that God was going to take care of you, you were promised that life was going to be great, and all of a sudden, Christians are being burned at the stake, they're being thrown to the lions, their families are being sold into slavery, you'd think this isn't a really good deal. Is it really worth following this Jesus if this is going to be what happens? But the promised hope of fulfillment, this vision of seeing the army of God ready to fight a battle, that's hope. That's hope. And that's what John is bringing. That's what John is seeing. John is seeing this hope of a better reality, this hope of a better future. John is seeing something awesome, incredible. He is seeing the masses, the armies of the Lamb amassing in preparation for battle against the devil. And they're marked. They're, again, the devil, the dragon, the beast marks their follower. Well, so in too does the Lamb. Mark their followers. And we, as followers of the Lamb, have been marked as well. We've talked about this before. The mark on the forehead in baptism. That's the mark of the Lamb. So what John is seeing here, John is seeing the warrior Christ. Now, even though, again, seen as the Lamb, but this is the warrior Christ. This is the warrior whom the Messiah was originally supposed to be, but didn't show up. That Messiah showed up as a baby. So John is seeing the warrior Christ rising up. So now you have the two great armies ready to fight it out. That's what we're visioning here. That's the vision. Okay, verse 2. And I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters, like the sound of a loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harps playing in their harps, harpists playing on their harps. And they sing a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and before the elders. All right, so a voice from heaven. This is the voice of God. John has heard this voice before. It was this voice that he heard from heaven calling him to come up to heaven. Again, remember, all of what we're seeing now at this point in the book, John is in the throne room of heaven. John is in the heaven. Now, whether he's physically there or spiritually there, it's not clear, and it doesn't matter. But what we're seeing here is that John has been called up into heaven by God to witness this. So he hears this voice from heaven, this voice from the throne, like the sound of many waters. It's soothing. It's graceful. It is not a voice that grates at you. It's not the voice of the dragon. It's a voice of soothing, but it's also a voice of power. That's where that thunder comes in. And we can hear soothing voices of power. Powerful voices can be soothing, can be melodic, can be enticing. And that's what John is talking about here. God's voice is not a voice of pounding down. God's voice is a voice of authority, but that authority is soothing. It's comforting. It is encouraging. It is melodic. It is beautiful. Versus the voice of the dragon, which would have been greedy and oppressive. So John hears this voice, this beautiful voice. And the voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on harps. Now, David was a harpist. We see in the Psalms that harp, and I don't know if any of you have ever heard a harpist play. We here at St. Paul's have been blessed for decades with a harpist that comes and plays on Christmas Eve. But the sound of the harp is beautiful. It's pure, but it's beautiful. It's very melodic and soothing. Soothing, I guess, is really the best word that I really can bring to it. It's very soft but yet it's clear. When the harpists would play the Christmas carols, they were soothing, but it was clear. You knew what was being played. So there was clarity and crispness and authority, but it was also beautiful. So this voice that John hears from heaven has many different layers, has many different intonations, and it brings out multiple things, which if we think about the voice of God, that is the voice of God. The voice of God has many layers to it. It has authority and power, authority in our lives, authority in the life of the world, but it's also melodic and clear and soothing and comforting and guiding. I mean, how many of us would want to follow a God who exerts authority by yelling at us all the time or crushing us down, beating us up? I know many of you may have grown up with the fire and brimstone sermons. the voice of God is it does come across that way sometimes. Sometimes that's the way God does have to speak. But God also speaks with clarity and gentleness, with authority. You can be gentle and have authority. I think that's one of the things that we've lost in our reality in the world is you can have authority and be gentle. And you can be mean and have no authority. So God's voice, the voice coming from heaven, it's a complex voice. It's a multi-layered voice. It's a voice that has many things. And really, if we think about it, that's how God speaks to us today. I don't know about you, but I've not had that clear, audible, Tim, do these things for me. God hasn't spoken to me that way. And maybe God has spoken to others that way, and I wouldn't take that away from him, but I will proclaim that God hasn't spoken to me that way. God has spoken to me in many and various ways, and sometimes with voices of authority, but those voices of authority also come with gentleness, guidance, soothing. That's what John is hearing here, and that's the vision. That's why we hear it. And they being the 144,000, the 144,000. I had a moment there. I was doing my math wrong. But the 144,000, they sing a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and before the elders. A new song. You know, we use that imagery in church a lot. Sing a new song to the Lord. A new song. New songs come from new realities. New realities come from new experiences. You know, when revolution happens, a new song comes forward. When change happens, a new song comes forward. It doesn't make any sense to sing an old song in a new circumstance. So these 144,000 that stand with the Lamb, they sing a new song. They sing a song of the newness of God, the newness of what God is bringing forward, the newness of creation. A song that hasn't been sung before because what they're seeing God hasn't done before. I mean, let's look at it this way. You know, we are in the Advent season, and we're getting ready for Christmas. And there's a lot of Christmas carols. I don't know, a lot of the radio stations that play Christmas carols are already doing it. The Jews weren't singing Silent Night before first Christmas. The Christmas event demanded new songs, something that was never done before. The resurrection demanded a new song. You know, even the disciples weren't singing Jesus Christ is risen today. That comes after Jesus Christ is risen. So this idea of singing a new song means that something new is going to happen, and the 144,000 are singing a song written for this event, written for this new thing, which is what requires a new song. So they're singing this new song. No one could learn that song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. Okay, here's an important part. Here's an important part. Something that we need to talk about. And that is, you know, you may be thinking to yourself, this sounds very exclusionary. Well, it is. It is exclusionary. We need to dispel with the idea that the scriptures proclaim an all-inclusive, all-access, anybody can get into heaven narrative. Because it doesn't. The scriptures do not proclaim that. If God wants to open the vaults of heaven to everybody, that's God's choice. But the scriptures very much proclaim a judgment-based circumstance where there's expectations by the ruler of the community. If you follow those expectations, you're in the community. If you don't follow those expectations, you're outside the community. Community survives by boundary. Without boundary, you don't have any community. Without boundary, you just have a free-for-all. I mean, you know, let's think about it. I'll give a very practical example. Where I stand right now, I am about, well, I can see the southernmost boundary of the city of Alliance. Okay, it's right out the window. It's probably a good, 40 yards away. If I had a pitching wedge, I could probably shoot a golf ball beyond the boundaries of Alliance. Now, without that boundary, then, taxation, where do you stop your taxes? Where do you stop your safety services? Where do you stop your water services and your sewer services? Okay? Boundaries are necessary because without boundaries, there's no clarity of what community is. And within God's reality, boundaries are necessary. Let's go back to the 10 Commandments for a minute. 10 Commandments that God gave Moses on Mount Sinai. I am the Lord your God. And as the Lord your God, if you're going to live in my community, then there's expectations. One is you shall have no other God before me. God doesn't want to play second fiddle. So to be in God's community, God is the only God. Now, you can believe in other gods. You just can't do that and be in community. It's not how it works. You shall not steal. Well, we can all steal. We have the capability of stealing. But if we're going to live in God's community, then stealing something is not going to happen. We can go out and steal, but we can't live in God's community and steal. That's not how it works. There are expectations, boundaries within community. One of the boundaries is that mark and that song. And what's laid out for us right now is that the only ones that get that new song are those who are in the community of God. Those 144,000. Is that fair? Well, God's not really working on the optic of fairness. Fairness is not really how God works, and this is important to grasp. I've talked about this before, but I don't think I've talked about it in this series. Fairness is a very human quality. And really, quite frankly, it's only a human quality when what's happening is unfair to us. Let's be honest. Seriously, let's be honest. Fairness is only in play and important when we are the ones being treated unfairly. Now, there are those certainly, who have a desire to see others treated fairly, absolutely. But overall, our sinfulness only drives us to the reality of fairness when it's unfair to us. If you're one of the 144,000, then you're one of 144,000. Are you concerned about those who are out? No. But if you're out, you want to be in that 144,000. Let's look at it this way. I've got 3 cookies and you've got 1 cookie. Well, fair would be for me to have 2 and you to have 2, right? Well, but I have 3 and you have 1. So fairness becomes an issue. But if the roles were reversed, and you had 3 and I had 1, would fairness be an issue for you? Not usually. Again, and maybe it would, and maybe you're one of those who have transcended that baseline fairness. The scriptures do not operate on the optic of fairness. They do not operate on the work of fairness. Fairness is not part of salvation because really, quite frankly, as Paul tells us, if God worked on fairness, we'd all be dead. Because we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. The fact that we all have life and breath and being shows a God who is massively unfair. Because if God were fair, then we would all be under the realm of judgment and wrath. We're not. We're under grace. As Christians, really, is there anything fair about the birth event? Absolutely not. The Word made flesh, maker of heaven and earth, coming down and being born in a manger, there's nothing fair about that. And then right behind me here, this is a cross. You can't see all of it. Is there anything fair about the cross? No. So we need to dispel with the idea of fairness. This is not to say that not everybody has access to heaven. But there is a judgment clause here. There is an in and an out. And right now, we're talking about those who are in. We're talking about the 144,000. The first class, if you will, of redeemed. It's not the only class. And we need to understand that heaven is expanded multiform. And there's room enough for everybody. So heaven is not limited to a number, as some would like to proclaim. Heaven is not limited to a number. Access to heaven, access to eternity is not a limited resource. There's enough heaven to go around for anybody who's willing to work and invest and accept it. So it's not about whether there's room or not. And the 144,000 that we're seeing here in chapter 14, these are the ones who, and we're going to find out how they are, but these are the warriors these are the spiritual warriors that are gathering around the Messiah. They have the new song. They have the mark of the forehead. They have the mark on their hand. They've got the name of the Father on the forehead, just like we do. Just like we do. And look, obviously you and I, we're still on earth because you're hearing this. If you're hearing this and you're in heaven, then, well, that's awesome. Really it is. But I would hope that if someone was in heaven, they wouldn't be spending time listening to podcasts on YouTube or on Facebook. They would be gathering around the throne giving thanks to God. I'm not trying to tear myself down. I'm just trying to say that up in heaven is probably going to be far more than that's the promise, that's the hope, that's the goal. All right. So these 144,000, these are the spiritual warriors. They've got the name of the Father on their forehead, marked by God, standing with the Lamb. And who are they? All right. Verse 4. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. These follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They have been redeemed from humankind as firstfruits for God and the Lamb, and in their mouths no lie was found. They are blameless. Okay, so a little bit of a little bit of reality here, a little bit of unfortunately what women have faced throughout history. The scriptures, in a lot of ways, raise up women and give them power and give them authority and give them voice. The fact that women followed Jesus would have been unheard of. The fact that women are in the genealogical line of Jesus and named in a document is unheard of. The fact that Mary was the first to encounter the risen Christ is unheard of. However, historically, and unfortunately this still does hold true today, historically, the woman was seen as the deceiver. The woman was seen as the one who drew power away. The woman was, Jezebel, the betrayer, the temptress. Okay, and some of that does come out in the scriptures. Some of that does, and this is part of what we're seeing here. Again, and unfortunately, we just had this beautiful image of Israel. The woman in the wilderness who gives birth to the Messiah, whom the dragon tries to snatch away. So there's a lot of imagery here that we have to wade through. And I'm laying it out for you for what it is. I'm not laying it out for you because I agree with it. Okay? I'm trying to be as honest and truthful to where the text is at. And this has been one of the challenges. It's always been one of the challenges when we move this text into century, is that the role of women has changed. The understanding of women has changed. It's changed in the church. It's changed in the workplace. It's changed in education. Is it equal? No. Is it better than it was? Yes. Is there still more room? Absolutely. And we're working towards that. But when we go back to the scriptures, which was written 2,000 years ago, we have our challenges. We have our struggles. This is not a statement, a referendum on Christians abstaining from any kind of sexual union. That is not where John is going here. You do not have to be a virgin to get into heaven. All right, I'm going to say that again. You do not have to be a virgin to get into heaven. That's not how it works, okay? And that's not what John is saying here. You don't even need to be a virgin to be a warrior of Christ. Make sure that we're clear about that, all right? What John is saying here, there's two things that come out. It is those who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. Now, in Rome, when a war was impending, when warriors were called up to go to battle, they were told to abstain from any kind of sexual intercourse prior to battle, even if they were married. Even if they were married. And the main reason for that was so that there was that longing, that separation, there was that angst, that aggression built up that would have been released and would have been dispelled. The warriors would have been satiated and they would have been calm. And that doesn't help when you're going to war. So the warriors of Christ, the 144,000, these are these spiritual virgins. They're in spiritual readiness. And since they've come into this spiritual readiness, they haven't had any kind of union. Okay? So a warrior, once the battle is called, they're called to abstain. So they would be, in terms of warrior readiness, virgins, unblemished. And women didn't fight wars in Rome, so it was always a man thing. Again, this is part of the historical reality that, the United States military is only beginning to grapple with is women in combat. Women didn't go to combat in Rome. That just didn't happen. Again, we can debate whether they would or wouldn't be good combat soldiers, but that's just where we're at in history. The other vision that is brought forth here is these 144,000. They didn't defile themselves with other cultures, with other regions. So women, and I don't like the imagery, okay? I don't. But this is the imagery that is being brought forward. Women, the idea of a woman, or defiling with a woman, anyway, was that someone was bowing down to another culture, was bowing down to another god. That was interacting with Rome or Assyria or China or whatever subculture, the Temple of Dionysus or what have you. So these are pure believers that have always and will always bow down first and foremost to Christ. This would even exclude any kind of convert that had a life of secularism and then moved into sacred life. For the warriors of Christ. Now, that is not to say that a convert doesn't have redemption. Please don't hear that either. This is where it gets tricky, and this is where we really need to dig in and make sure that we're clearing and hearing everything. Converts obviously still have access to heaven, but again, when you're in community, boundaries exist. And the warriors who are going with the Lamb, they are the ones who have been pure. They are the ones who have been pure, who have not defiled themselves with other cultures or other belief structures or any other kind of sinful behavior that would question their loyalty to the Lamb. Why is this? Here we go. When you're fighting a battle, particularly the battle to end all battles, you need to depend on your warriors, and you need to depend on your warriors, depend on the mission. Depend on the reason why they're going to war. Even so, if they're going to have to lay down their life for the sake of the mission, they're willing to do that. And I go, well, I mean, I could turn away from here, and I still got a life back in that city over there. I just have to go back to it. If there is no other, the purity, the connection, this is all you know. This is your investment. Win or lose, you stay with the Lamb. And that's what they do. They have been redeemed from humankind as first fruits for God, and they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. So the Lamb goes, 144,000 go. The Lamb goes, 144,000 go. This is what an army does. This is what spiritual warriors do. What we're seeing here is we're seeing the Lamb with this tried and true, pure, 100% bought in, loyal to no other battle. And really, quite frankly, again, if the Lamb showed up today and called forth the warriors, I would hope and pray that I would have the strength to stand with the Lamb and fight. But if I'm honest with myself, I know there's a part of me that'd be like, nah. I mean, why should I go and fight that war? I've got a nice house over here. And not to say that it's true or worthy or faithful, but that's part of my sinfulness. It's part of my sinfulness. And I strive and pray and hope that if the Lamb called me into battle, I'd go. But, again, we talk about that saint-sinner. I know the Lamb, but I also know that I'm a sinner. And as a sinner, I have my failings, my drawbacks. All right. So this 144,000 pure, loyal, redeemed from humankind. So they do come up. They're not angels now. Excuse me. They're not created for the purpose of being warriors. They have come up out of humankind. But they show their purity and their loyalty to Christ in the world. So they showed that purity and loyalty. I mean, and they were pure and loyal to the covenants they made with God. They were pure and loyal to the covenants they made with each other, be it in marriage or family or what have you. They showed a loyalty that God honors by drawing them into the 144,000. And in their mouths no lie was found. They are blameless. So again, there's the pushing of that purity identity. These people were truly buying into what the Lamb was doing. They were truly buying into the work of God in the world. Again, that purity of person, that blameless, not lying, loyal to the Lamb. That's the 144,000. That's the ones to whom will follow the Lamb wherever he goes and will fight the battles. This is the Lamb's standing army, if you will. These spiritual warriors who are ready to go. And if the Lamb goes to battle with the dragon, then the 144,000 are going with him. Because that's what loyal warriors do. They don't back down. They go to war and sacrifice, even if it means they sacrifice their own life. For the sake of the Lamb, for the sake of the mission. So that's the opening scene that we get here before we get into this, these angels of judgment. Again, in judgment, it's important. I'll touch on it. I'll probably touch on it a little bit more next week. But, we would like to think that God is just going to open the gates and let everybody in. Why does God have to judge? Well, without judgment, there's no boundary. Without boundary, there's no community. Without judgment, you can do whatever you want. And if you can do whatever you want, why are so many people sacrificing and giving and walking the path? Why even send the Lamb to begin with? If anybody can just come in, it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what you do. Judgment. Judgment is the ultimate end to a life lived. If we weren't going to be judged for who we are, then why would we live the life we live? If there wasn't a God for us to answer to, then why would we follow the precepts of the God who's before us? Judgment's necessary because that's what creates boundaries in community. I mean, we have judgments here at the church. There have been people who have, throughout my ministry, have showed up at a church, whatever church I'm at, worshiped once and says, I want to become a member. That's awesome. We have expectations. You got to come back. Got to participate. If you want to be part of us, you got to be invested in us. Well, that's a judgment. I'm making a judgment call. and saying that if you want to be part of what we're doing, you got to believe what we believe and participate in what we're doing. That's just sheer will. It's just sheer reality. I mean, if you're looking to, enter into a marital relationship comes with boundaries. Those boundaries come with judgment. I'm going to judge this person as to whether they are willing to live within the boundaries. Not to say that I'm going to condemn them. Judgment doesn't necessarily mean to lead to condemnation, but it leads to boundary setting. And for God, there are boundaries. You're in or you're out. You're either following God or you're not. You're either doing what God has asked you to do because God has offered you redemption, or you're not. That's where judgment comes in. One or the other. You're either in or you're out. There is no middle ground in this world. In the world of God, there is no middle ground. You're either part of God's community or you're not. All right, my friends, that's where we're going to stop today. I hope that was helpful. Like I said, there's a lot to it. And as where we've gone through kind of settles in, I might come back around if there's something I missed. Please feel free to reach out to me. Excuse me, if you have any questions or comments, you don't like me to touch on anything, my information will come up after this session is done. Feel free to use them. I'll do the best I can either to answer you directly or bring it into the next session if it's a question I think that everybody needs to hear the answer to. Thank you all for your day, for your time. It's been a pleasure to be with you today. I pray that whatever God brings today, whatever you face today, you're blessed by it, you enjoy it, and you're able to see God's presence in the midst of it. God bless you. We'll see you next time.